snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Hello everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the RTI Podcast. I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RockyTopInsider.com. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a podcast here. No Ben McKee. He's got a lot of stuff going on. In fact, he is heading out of town for the weekend. But don't worry, we'll have plenty of coverage for you of the Memphis-Tennessee game, so don't worry about that. We've got that taken care of for you. But for this podcast, since Ben is busy and also with football practice going on with the bowl game, prep and everything happening kind of all at the same time, it's a very busy time right now for Tennessee athletics. I wanted to do an interview here to have a good kind of podcast for you guys still, because I wanted to make sure we talked about this Memphis-Tennessee game today for you guys. So I'm going to bring on Drew Hill of the Daily Memphian to talk about the Tigers. We talk a little bit about Tennessee and Memphis continuing the series after this next season, because we both kind of wanted to see it happen. The kind of Penny and Rick Barnes stuff and how Vol fans feel about Penny, and also about obviously this upcoming game. A lot of a breakdown about the Memphis Tigers, what Vol fans should expect from them, kind of what he thinks how the game will play out, the atmosphere in Thompson Bowling. So I wanted to at least have someone on here to discuss this game, because I really wanted to discuss it. So we'll have all kinds of stuff for you guys this weekend for the game. We should be having an RTI and VR2 recruiting podcast coming out sometime this evening as well on Friday. Or if we can't do it today, we'll for sure do one this weekend, because you guys have been demanding a second one since we did one earlier this week. So we're definitely going to do that, because there's a lot of visitors coming in this weekend for Tennessee. So we'll talk about that too. But I wanted to discuss Tennessee and Memphis and men's basketball ahead of this weekend's huge matchup. So without further ado, here is my interview with Drew Hill of the Daily Memphian. And I have with me here today for our special interview for the RTI podcast, Drew Hill. He's the Memphis Tigers basketball beat writer for the Daily Memphian. I want to get him on here to discuss this weekend's huge game between Tennessee and Memphis in men's basketball. Drew, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. It should be a fun one. I'm expecting a crazy atmosphere in Knoxville on Saturday. And, I think both teams have this game marked on their calendar for a long time, so it should be fun.
I agree. Drew, have you ever been to a game in Thompson Bowling?
I have not. This will be – I actually grew up in Kentucky originally, so I've been to some pretty – rowdy basketball atmospheres, but never Thompson Bowling Arena, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think you're going to be in for a treat. It'll be very loud. It was going to be one of those games that, Vol fans, like you said, would have circled and would be very excited about anyway. But then you had all the drama from the game last year, with all the comments made from both coaches, with just the way I think both fan bases reacted towards each other as well. So it's going to be hostile for the Tigers, and with the team being as young as they are, it'll be the first time they've kind of experienced this type of atmosphere. So I'll be looking forward to it. And for Tennessee's young players too, they've never experienced kind of home atmosphere like this either. So it's going to be a very interesting feeling out process in the first 5-10 minutes of the game. Before we get into some of the minutiae of this game and Memphis in general, I am very curious about Memphis's view of this game specifically, and kind of the rivalry in general, because I get a feeling from Tennessee fans that I think there are two very different types of feelings about this game, and I think both fan bases approach this rivalry, because I think it's a rivalry. I think they approach it very differently, and I'm curious, before I kind of share my thoughts on what Tennessee does, I'm curious from your interaction with Memphis fans and Tiger fans, how do the Tigers, what do they feel about Tennessee, and how are they approaching this game?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting sort of dynamic. The rivalry is, in my opinion. I think on one side, obviously Penny Hardaway is the biggest enemy of Tennessee and of Tennessee fans at this point, based off of what he said, and sort of the way that he carries himself. I know that definitely gets under some Tennessee fans' skin a little bit. Whereas I think Memphis fans see their biggest beef with Tennessee is probably that they feel like Tennessee in general has a false sense of superiority over Memphis, especially when it comes to basketball, because they're very, very defensive of their basketball program. It's been well documented. They've had a lot of successes, and then they've had their bumps in the road as well. And so I think just overall, that's where Memphis fans grow the most frustrated. And it's also difficult, too, when you consider the fact that you're in a city that is largely Memphis fans, but there is no doubt a strong collection of Tennessee fans in Memphis as well, too. So it doesn't matter what the situation is. It's almost like Memphis fans the Tennessee fan base, and I'm sure that's extremely frustrating for them. So I think their sort of hatred in this rivalry is more pointed towards Tennessee's fans and sort of the status at which Tennessee holds itself, whereas maybe the Tennessee side of the rivalry is, let's be honest, a lot of it's pointed at Penny Hardaway. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I agree. I think Penny has become one of those villains that Vol fans like to point out. You can look out through the years in football. You can point to a Steve Spurrier, an Urban Meyer, guys like that in football. In basketball, I don't think you have had quite as many, but I think you can lump in obviously Calipari in there at Kentucky, and also when he was at Memphis. I think it's interesting that Calipari's been at two of the schools that Vol fans love to hate on the most, and he's was a villain for Tennessee at Memphis, but I think he kind of grew even to more of one at Kentucky. But I do agree with you. I think that a lot of the distaste towards Memphis has been because of Penny Hardaway, at least in this most recent iteration. And I think whether conscious or not, I think you're right. You're spot on with the way that I think how the two different viewpoints of these fan bases of Memphis feeling like they don't get the respect they feel like they deserve, but then Vol fans also, like I said, whether conscious or not, kind of come off as this feeling of superiority. And it's interesting to me, the two different kind of takes on the situation, because like I said, before we get into more specifics about this team and about this game, I would love for this series to continue after next season. I understand kind of why it needs to go on a break. I think both these coaches, it might be better off if they kind of have a break from each other for a little bit. I understand if it doesn't happen. I think it's going to suck if it doesn't, because I think Memphis and Tennessee is a really not fun game to watch and a really fun game to cover for the fans, for the media, for everyone. I want it to happen every year or as often as I can, but I understand it going away. But I also think a lot of Tennessee fans, I've run a poll on our Twitter account, Rocky Top Insider, asking, do you want to see this continue after next season, after the neutral site game in Nashville? And at this point of me recording this podcast with you, it's around, I think, 70% yes to about 30% no. It's kind of surprised me how high the no is. I would like to see it. I'm curious, do Memphis fans, do they feel the same way? Do they feel like it's a kind of a weak move for Barnes and them to essentially kind of say, we're not sure if we're going to do this after this next season? Yes,
they do. They think it's a weak move. I'll just be perfectly blunt about it. And I think that I probably disagree with you. Like, I don't think that there should be a break. I think that these are two programs that it goes beyond the head coaches for me, and it goes beyond even the players. Like, yes, I know there's a disagreement there, and you can say it's all for the fans. This is for college basketball culture in general. Like, the casual college basketball fan probably has interest in Memphis versus Tennessee, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a game that other people want to watch. This is a game that extends past the state and past whatever beef Penny Hardaway and Rick Barnes have. And it's a game that, in my opinion, should be played every single year. And I think that's kind of the reason why the second that Barnes sort of started saying, well, we'll just see where it goes from here, you heard Penny come out and say, well, hold on now. Yeah, like I understand that I was probably the one who escalated things, but, we need to play this game. And it's interesting to hear the Memphis players, too, have talked about it a lot this week. And former Memphis star Jeremiah Martin talked about it. And he just said, it would be selfish on the part of the coaches to end an awesome series like this. And it's just a shame that some of this happens. Like, I know for a long time, people really enjoyed watching Kentucky and Indiana play every year. Well, now that game is gone, and they point fingers at each other and blame the other side for the series ending. And you would hate to see one of the best rivalries in college basketball, which is this game, which is tends to be great entertainment every year, even go on a hiatus. They should be playing every year, in my opinion, and I feel very strongly about that.
I would love to see it every year or as often as you can get it, because I agree with you. I think it's good for the game. I mean, for the longest time, I think that number 1 versus number 2 matchup of Tennessee-Memphis was the most watched college basketball game on ESPN for like years. And I think it's been surpassed since then, but it was for years one of the most watched college basketball game on an ESPN, family of networks. So I agree with you. I think it should happen as often as it can. We'll see. I would love for it to extend beyond this upcoming season. The next season when it's the neutral site game in Nashville. I think it's a thing where fans of Tennessee look at it as it has more benefit to Memphis, because Tennessee can, they have typically a really strong out of conference schedule as it is, and a really good SEC schedule. But at the same time, I also just, to me, you play these games, especially early on in the season, because of this rivalry, because of the headlines, because college basketball gets knocked on for being only like a 2-month sport. One of those reasons is because we don't, you don't get a ton of really good early season matchups. Tennessee-Memphis in December or in early January, that's a premier matchup. That's why we've seen, I think, a more concerted effort to get some of these early season tournaments going with the Michigan States and Kentucky's playing each other, the Dukes and playing some big time teams. I think Tennessee-Memphis should be a December or January game about as often as we can get it. So we can discuss that for a whole podcast, Drew. But I want to get to the actual game and this actual Memphis team coming into this game on Saturday. The number 13 Tigers. They're going to be without 2 of their best players on the team. Obviously, James Wiseman's been out for a little bit, and that's a whole different bag of drama with his being suspended for 12 games, which I think is kind of crazy that he's suspended like that and everything. But he's going to be out. You also have Lester Quinones not going to be playing this weekend. That's 2 of Memphis's better scoring options that are not going to be in this game. Looking at their kind of offensive stats the last 3 games without both those guys on the court, I'm writing a piece about what to kind of watch for this game. In the first 6 games of the season, I think Memphis was averaging like 86 points per game and shooting almost 50% from the floor. Over the last 3, I think it's only like 73 points a game, and they're shooting barely over 40% as a team. They're shooting better from 3, but just how has the absence of Wiseman and Quinones over the last 3 games, how's it really changed the makeup and the way that Memphis is going about playing the game?
Yeah, it's been a pretty interesting – it's interesting the way that this has played out, because they lost Quinones early in the game against Ole Miss, which they ended up winning. Mm-hmm. And so they really didn't have James Wiseman or Lester Quinones in those first 2 games that they won against Ole Miss at home and then on the road against NC State at the Barclays Center. And they played really well on offense in both of those games. And especially in the first half against NC State, they looked like a team that wasn't going to miss a beat at all without those guys. And then they come home, they play against some lesser competition in Bradley, and then travel to UAB, and it's just like they left their offense at the hotel room in Brooklyn against NC State, and it just completely disappeared. Without a doubt, they are not as good with those 2 guys. They still have plenty of scoring options on this team. What they lose in those 2 guys, really, is their best rim protector and best player, and then a guy that was leading the team in minutes, and is a bigger guard that they like to use on defense on the wing and can kind of play their up-tempo style of play in Lester Quinones. So that's really what they're losing without those guys. The offense, it's difficult to read whether or not these struggles are legitimate or whether or not these struggles are, okay, they just didn't shoot the ball well in their last 2 games. But we'll see. And in terms of Quinones, there was a chance that maybe outside an outside shot he might get a few minutes in this game, but Penny ruled him doubtful yesterday, so I don't think that's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see if they can get it going on the offensive end. I think that the atmosphere might play a very big role in that, and so really the difference between Memphis with those 2 guys and without them, I think, is more impacted on the defensive end than it is on the offensive end.
Yeah, I'm going to ask about the defense here in a second. But I think obviously if Wiseman's in the game, he's Memphis's go-to guy for everything defensively and offensively. He's averaging about 20 and 10 in his 3 games he's played. Without him, without Quinones on the floor, is Precious the go-to guy if Memphis needs a bucket or needs a guy to kind of go on a run? Is Precious the go-to guy, or is it kind of more of a scoring by committee now?
It's more of a scoring by committee. I think the 2 guys that can create their own shot the best without those guys on the floor are DJ Jeffries on the wing, as well as Boogie Ellis, who was a former Duke commit that ended up at Memphis. And so you've seen those 2 guys have had huge scoring outputs, and then they've had games where they haven't really showed up, and that's just part of being a freshman and learning the game. But they're both capable, so I think maybe those are the 2 guys to watch on the offensive end. Precious is just his motor, it just doesn't stop. He grabs offensive rebounds. He gets the dirty work baskets down low in the paint. He's going to get his. I mean, he's at this point, it feels like he's a lock for, 15 points and 10 rebounds when James isn't in the game. But it's hard to imagine them running a ton of sets for him on the offensive end in this game against Tennessee.
You mentioned defense there. Defensively, I expect this to be a defensive-oriented game if Tennessee can kind of control the pace. And I'll also ask about pace here in a second. But defensively, Tennessee's been one of the better teams in the entire country. On KenPom, they're the 14th best adjusted defensive efficiency. On the other side, I like to use Hazometrics. They are ranked 16th. Memphis, meanwhile, on KenPom is 41st and 17th in Hazometrics. They've been, Memphis has been very good on defense. I think they've only allowed 3 teams all season, 3 of the 9 teams they've played to score with 64 points. What makes Memphis so good on defense? Is it their length, or what is exactly they do?
They're just very athletic, and I think the numbers are a little skewed on the Memphis defense because they play at such a fast pace, and they've had such trouble rebounding on the defensive end so far this year that teams are bound to score more points against Memphis because they just get more opportunities because Memphis is shooting 14.8 seconds into the shot clock. So there's just naturally going to be more possessions, and there's naturally going to be more points. They are a top 5 team in the country in block percentage. They're blocking a lot of shots. They're very athletic, even without James Wiseman in their lineup for most of the year. And then their 2-point defense and just their opponent's field goal percentage in general have been really, really good. So far this year, I believe they're top 15 or close to that in the country in both of those statistics. So they're very good at altering shots. They're very long and athletic. And so it's tough to get easy baskets against them. But at the same time, they just have a tendency to give up more points because they just want to play fast and as chaotic as possible. And you're just naturally going to give up more baskets when you're playing that style.
Yeah, that leads perfectly in my next question because I wanted to ask about their pace. Comparing these 2 teams' paces, I don't know that you could find, unless Memphis plays Virginia, I don't know if you're going to be able to find a game this year where you're going to see just the dichotomy in the pace. Memphis, I think, on KenPom is like 10th in adjusted tempo, and Hazometrics, they're in the top 25. I think they're one of the faster paced teams. By my estimation, looking at how many field goal attempts they have per game and free throw attempts, they're getting about 88 opportunities per game to score, Memphis is, so that's a ton. On the other hand, Tennessee is near the bottom. They're I think 303rd in KenPom, 288th in Hazometrics, so they're on the much closer to the Virginia style of kind of slowing you down and not playing a whole lot of getting a lot of shots up. Where Memphis is averaging around 88 opportunities to score, Tennessee, on the other hand, is averaging about 74, 75 opportunities per game to score. Has Memphis, have they really played a team this year that's really tried to slow them down? If they have, how do they react to that?
Not really, if we're being honest. There hasn't been a team like Tennessee, at least, that they've played so far. And you know what? They're going to press. That they do that every game. I think that whoever controls this tempo is probably going to be the team that wins the game, in my opinion.
The same thing, I agree.
And I think that the atmosphere, the crazy, rowdy atmosphere, actually probably plays to Memphis's advantage in that scenario because you're just naturally going to be more wound up in an atmosphere like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to feed off of that. And I don't think any team has really tried to slow them down the way Tennessee will try and slow them down. But it doesn't matter. They're going to try and play their own pace at their own pace, no matter what. It doesn't matter if Tennessee is controlling the pace or not. They're still going to try and run and shoot early in the shot clock and play their own style. And if that ends up being their downfall, then they'll probably allow that to happen, because they're not going to switch up their game plan. That's been pretty clear from the start of the season until now.
Because of that up and down style, turnovers can be an issue, and actually turnovers have been a little bit more of an issue with this Tennessee team than it was last year. Both these teams actually, I think, overall do a really good job of getting assists and passing and getting buckets off passes. Tennessee this season, essentially 64% of their made field goals this year have come off assists, and then Memphis is, I think, right around 54%. So, with over half of both these teams are both their buckets coming off of assists. At the same time, Tennessee has about 14 turnovers a game. Memphis, I think, is turning over exactly 15 times a game. How big of an issue has turnovers been for this team this season?
They're not as I'm looking for the word here. They don't hurt them as much as it might hurt an average team, simply because they get so many possessions.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just going to turn the ball over when you play at that pace. It's just part of the way that it goes and the style that they want to play. But when you're firing up 80-plus shots a game, 1 or 2 turnovers here and there, 3 or 4 turnovers here and there, they don't hurt your total at the end of the game quite as much. Where I feel like with Tennessee, their turnover problems, especially in a game where they want to limit possessions, are a little bit more problematic. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. It's been an issue. The one game that really stands out for Tennessee this year is when they played Florida State. They turned the ball over, I think, 21 times in that game, and still only lost by 3. But that was the game where all fans and Rick Barnes especially has pointed out and saying, hey, that can't happen again. It's been an issue. That's been the only game where it's really cost Tennessee. But yeah, if Tennessee has more turnovers, like you said, because of their limited number of possessions, it's more of a high volume amount of their possessions ending in turnover. Whereas if you're Memphis and you're averaging 70-something possessions a game, 15 turnovers isn't as bad as Tennessee doing 13 in about 45 possessions. So I think that's a good point and something to kind of watch out for in this game. Memphis, I'm looking at just kind of their team makeup and kind of who's their the kind of leading scorers, what they do in offense. To go back to the offense side of things for a little bit here, Precious is about 6'9", 225 at a lot of length. DJ Jeffrey 6'7", 225, a lot of length there. But then you also have guys coming off the bench like Alex Lomax and Tyler Harris, who are 5'10", 5'9". What exactly is this team a team that you mentioned they like to run and get shots up? Are they going to shoot a lot of threes? Are they going to kind of work it inside? What's kind of their more offensive philosophy if they're in the half court?
When they're in the half court, they're going to try and drive and then throw it into the inside. You're not going to see a lot of threes simply because they haven't shot it very well from out there this year. Tyler Harris and Boogie Ellis are definitely your 2 biggest threats from deep. Memphis is kind of divided among their guards. They have 2 guards that shoot it really well, which are those 2, and then you have Alex Lomax and Damian Baugh, who are by far more defensive-oriented guys. Although Alex Lomax has probably been their most effective guy so far this year, and he doesn't even start. They kind of bring him off the bench as sort of, he's only a sophomore, but he's one of the most experienced players on the team as their sort of calming force, glue guy type of guy. And it wouldn't surprise me if they decided to move him into the starting lineup this weekend against Tennessee, just because it's going to be so crazy, especially in those first couple of minutes, and they might need him on the floor, and they can't really afford to fall behind in a game like this. But I think in general, no, they're not a team that is a gunners from the outside, from the 3-point line. You're not really going to see that. There's really 3 guys who are going to take a lot of threes, and that would be DJ Jeffries, Boogie Ellis, and Tyler Harris, and those are probably your 3 biggest threats from the outside.
To shift gears here a little bit to close out the podcast, to move away from kind of this game and look a little bit towards the future and kind of these two programs, if they don't play on the court, I think there'll still be plenty of off the court storylines, because Memphis and Tennessee historically haven't really, gone head to head on a lot of recruits. In this last cycle, you had Jaden Springer, who, Memphis was interested. I don't really know that one you would call head to head. I don't think Memphis was I don't know. They were definitely interested. I think Springer was interested in them, but obviously Tennessee ends up signing him, and now he's in Tennessee's fall signing class right now in this 2020 cycle. But looking ahead to 2021, you have Kennedy Chandler, the 5-star point guard out of Briarcrest over at Memphis. Tennessee's, obviously very interested in him. Memphis is interested in him. Without asking you to make a prediction, what's kind of your feel on Kennedy Chandler? Are you anticipating Tennessee and Memphis starting to have, some more recruiting battles in basketball?
Yeah, no, I think that the recruiting battles maybe might become the norm for Tennessee and Memphis. I know that now that Tennessee got Jaden Springer from IMG, that's very interesting, because Penny Hardaway has a great connection with IMG. There's a former Memphis player down there as a coach. His son, Jaden Hardaway, played at IMG. So he has a lot of connections there, and they recruit a lot of IMG players. So Jaden choosing Tennessee wasn't necessarily surprising, but it was interesting to me. And then you have, like you said, Kennedy Chandler in Memphis. Now, the thing about Kennedy Chandler, and I know you don't want me to make a prediction, I think that he was waiting on that Duke offer, which he just recently got within this week. I think it's going to be hard for both of these teams to pull Kennedy Chandler away from Duke if Duke really wants him, and as long as that offer is committable. I think that Duke will have a really good chance at getting him, because it just feels like that's kind of been from talking to Kennedy and his dad, that's been a school that he's been dreaming of getting an offer from for a long time. So that's certainly going to complicate things for Memphis and Tennessee, but they are two of the schools that have been in on him. Well, Tennessee is a school that's been in on him for a long time, and then Memphis, it's very well documented that kids from the Memphis area very rarely tell Penny Hardaway no. So it'll be interesting. I think Duke might be the team to beat, though, in that recruitment.
Yeah, the Duke offer really threw a kind of a curveball in the whole situation, because he'd gotten offers from, I think, North Carolina too. But like you said, that's a school that I know he really likes. And if Duke wants a kid, they usually get him. That's not always been the case, though. I mean, you can look at a few big misses by Duke here in the last few years. And like I said, Memphis gained James Wiseman, the number one overall player last cycle. That was huge for the Tigers. But yeah, looking at Memphis's roster, they have like 6 kids from Memphis. Obviously, a couple of guys aren't contributing a whole lot, but two of your bigger names we've mentioned on this podcast, Alex Lomax and Tyler Harris, 2 of the big bench guys, are from Memphis. Isaiah Stokes obviously not playing, but he transferred in. He's from Memphis. That's an interesting storyline that I wish Stokes were playing, because obviously Isaiah was the younger brother of former Tennessee basketball player Jarnell Stokes, who came to Tennessee as a 5-star recruit. I was actually a student when he came in to Tennessee. I remember all the excitement of him coming in mid-year. So I wish Isaiah was active on the roster and playing, because I think that would have been an interesting storyline for this game, or just kind of the team in general. Yeah, no,
we'll see. He would have maybe had a decent impact on this team this year, but and he is definitely a big body and will be a great rebounder for Memphis down the line. But they're kind of loaded up in their front court right now, and they might be. Obviously, everyone sort of expects Precious Achiuwa and James Wiseman to go in the NBA draft this June, so he'll definitely have a bigger role on next season's team. But yeah, it would have been a fun storyline to follow. I just don't know what kind of impact he might have had he even been available.
Yeah, I agree. Last question, and you actually kind of already touched on it there. And Drew, thank you again for joining me on the podcast. You mentioned some of the guys who you imagine will be gone from next year's team. How many of these guys do you foresee leaving to the NBA? Because James Wiseman's going to go. I imagine Precious will go. But how many of the other freshmen and maybe even the sophomores like Alex Lomax and Tyler Harris, how many more of these guys do you expect to be gone before Tennessee and Memphis play again next season?
Sure. I think from talking to some people behind the scenes at Memphis, they're expecting at least 4 scholarships to be open at the end of the year. So I'm not saying 4 guys go to the NBA, because I don't think that that's a realistic possibility if the draft were, within this month or or even maybe by the end of the season. Two of them are almost a guarantee, Precious Achiuwa and James Wiseman. I know Precious might have a chance to improve his stock, but he's sort of an older freshman, so it wouldn't make a ton of sense for him to come back. So I think those two are pretty much guaranteed to be gone. And then you have other guys that have a chance, an outside chance at making the NBA, guys like DJ Jeffries, Boogie Ellis, some very talented players who are like a fringe one-and-done type guy, maybe like a second-round or late first-round type guy when it's all said and done. So if you have three guys go to the NBA and then you anticipate at least one transfer, because that's just kind of the climate of college basketball, and you just know players are going to transfer at the end of the year, at least one or two from almost every single team, then you can almost anticipate four guys will be gone, maybe even more than that by the end of the year.
Well, Drew, you've been a great interview here on the RTI podcast. I thank you so much for joining me here. Let our listeners know if they want to keep up with Memphis basketball and kind of what they can expect from this game and from the team moving forward. If they want to follow Penny and the Tigers, and also what Memphis is doing recruiting-wise moving forward, where can they follow you and find your work?
Yeah, they can find my work at thedailymemphian.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at DrewHill_DM.
Awesome. Drew, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep, anytime. Thanks.